What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're gonna be doing a little bit of a seat delete rework in the back of the Tacoma. If you guys have maybe seen my past videos, you'll know I did a complete rear seat delete in my Tacoma years ago now, and it's working out awesome, but we now have a baby and we wanna be able to bring that baby on camping trips. So I'm gonna have to redo that. We're gonna put the 60% of our seats back in the rear, and then we're gonna leave the 40% deleted on the driver's side because that is where our fridge is gonna be stored and be nice and secure in the back. So let's get right to it. For anybody unfamiliar with the previous rear seat delete, I'll just give you a quick rundown. So built this a few years ago. This is actually the second one I built. I made it a little bit bigger than my first rendition. Generally, I just keep on this side, it's just general camping supplies, so like a jet boil, bear spray, thermocell, you know, sunscreen, bug spray, all that good stuff, just because that's easily accessible under the awning. And then typically I would have my fridge secured right here. We got all this space in the back here, which is really nice for storage. And then of course this little thing can flip up if you have your seats forward, so you can access all the storage here. On the passenger side of the truck, this was my tool drawer, or it is my tool drawer. I have all my spare tools and just some other miscellaneous stuff. I always have a load out of tools with me, just because you never know. So it was nice to have this drawer to store all this stuff. So I am gonna have to find a new place for it all, but we'll get that all sorted out. Like I mentioned, I'm gonna have the 60% seat on this side. So that will allow me to have two seats in the back, one for a car seat, and then one where Amanda can even hop in the back with the baby on really long road trips just to keep the baby occupied. I am gonna try to keep this dead space right here, and that's because I'm thinking the house battery for the electrical setup is gonna end up being stored somewhere back here or even tucked behind the other back seats. We'll just kind of have to see. All right, we got all the parts and pieces needed to build out our rear seat delete. I went with a black extrusion from tnuts.com. In the past, I have normally done the silver. The silver is a little bit cheaper cost-wise, but this time I wanted to go with a different look, and since I was doing a smaller drawer module, cost really wasn't significantly higher by going with the black over the silver. As far as sizing goes, we got four 16-inch pieces. These are 1 inch by 1 inch, by the way. We got four 7 1/4 pieces, which these are gonna be our uprights that determine how tall it is. And then we have 6 of 18-inch pieces. So this determines the depth of everything. The reason we have 6 is we have one for each corner, and then we have one that our door slides are gonna mount to, which I will show you a lot more about that a little bit later. These are the most expensive part of doing any sort of 80-20 project. If you can figure out a way to join all this extrusion without using these fancy corner pieces, you will save a ton of money. I do like the way they look though, so I went ahead and went with that route, and plus I like how simple and clean everything looks once they're joined. This is just a little hardware, how we're gonna attach it to the truck. A little more on that later. We got some 18-inch soft close drawer slides. Using the soft close, of course, has a nice soft close action, and also it helps keep the drawer from being able to rattle around. This is some upper trim, which I'll show you more later. We got some Fuze from Liquid Nails used to basically stick our marine grade carpet that we're gonna be doing on some parts of the build. Here is our drawer latch. Same exact latch I've done on many builds in the past. And then we got some other miscellaneous hardware I'll get into a little bit later. I have enough leftover wood from our previous projects that we're gonna use. This is like a hardwood plywood essentially. Then also we're gonna do some filler panels. We're using some ABS sheeting that I had left over, and then some marine grade carpeting that are pretty much just glued together with the liquid nails. But yeah, that's just a quick overview. Let's get started building this thing. So I'm gonna give you a quick crash course on how these pieces join. So when you order them, you can select the length you want your extrusion to be, and then you can also select for it to have drill and tapped threads on each end. So this is 1/4 20 American threads that already come pre-tapped if you select it in the menu. These corner cubes already come with that exact size thread hardware. So it makes sense to go ahead and go to 1/4 20, even if you're thinking you're gonna go to metric. I've made that mistake in the past. Just go ahead and select 1/4 20 thread for this. As far as joining it goes, you can see it's got these little keys that kind of line up with the extrusion. And then you may be able to see in there, see how now you can see your threaded hole. So at this point, all you would do is take your screw and thread it in there. And after, of course, it's threaded in there, that is locked into place. And then you can start putting this together basically like a set of Legos. So super, super simple. So now that you understand how it works, first thing we're gonna do is grab 2 of our 18-inch pieces and then 2 of our 16-inch pieces. Set them up like this. We are basically creating the base of the drawer system. This is what's gonna sit flat on the ground. So we can go ahead and get this assembled. You can use, in the past I've used, honestly, it sounds stupid, but fingernail polish works really well. It's a good thread locker that's not gonna end up having it forever tight. Obviously, when you're building something like this, you're probably never gonna have to take it apart. We're gonna go ahead and do red Loctite on all of our hardware as we run it in.
With the addition of the red Loctite, the screws do not need to be very tight. They are Allen head, so they can be stripped out, especially if you're not using the correct size. So just keep that in mind while you're assembling this drawer.
With our base assembled, we're going to work on getting our verticals in. This is going to determine the height of our drawer. These are 7 1/4 pieces, and then we have these little nifty corner connectors here. And what these are going to do is slide down in here, and it'll allow us to attach our other extrusions, which are going to hold our drawer slides. So now you can see these are technically joined. There is 2 Allen heads, which you may be able to see there. You tighten those up, and that is how you basically get these to stick together. We're going to have the verticals, of course, screwed to our corner connectors we just did, and then we're going to let this little hardware butt all the way down as far as it goes. So no matter how much weight's in the drawer, even if your little Allens are loose or not, there's no way that the extrusion that our slide is mounted to is going to be able to drop down any further and get out of alignment. So we'll go ahead and get all 4 of our verticals on and give you a better look at what it looks like after it's assembled to this point.
When it comes to building with extrusion, sometimes you do have to plan ahead, and this is a perfect example. If I were to have assembled a complete box of this, I would have not been able to slide these corner connectors into our vertical posts. So as you're building, just think ahead on what needs to be positioned where. That way you don't have to end up backing up and redoing anything.
It can be a little tricky to get to those Allen keys in there, but all you got to do is just tighten it while it's up to get to the bottom side. And then once it's all the way down and seated to our edge, to where no matter how hard we push on this, our slides are not going to be able to go down. You can take kind of like a standard Allen key and kind of get at it from an angle and tighten it up. But now that those are all in, we are going to work on our filler panels. We have to put the filler panels in before we do the top part of the structure because we need access to the T-slots on our extrusion. So this is one that I've already made. This will be facing the seats that are in the Tacoma right now. As you can see, it just slides in our channels here. Just make sure it's nice and seated, and it's not going to go anywhere or really rattle around, especially once we kind of encapsulate it with our other pieces of extrusion. How I ended up making these was ABS plastic sheeting and then use some of the Fuze adhesive and some of the ring carpeting. You can see I did notch our corner here, and that is because our corner connectors have these little pieces that are sticking out that we got to have clearance for. So with that notch, it allows us to have the clearance to be able to bolt that up like normal. We'll go ahead and make 2 more filler panels that are going to fill in our sides here. We're not going to worry about the tiny little gap here. Nothing's really going to be able to fall through there. We'll just make our side fillers here, and then once we get those sorted, we can start assembling the top half of the structure.
This is actually the first time I've done filler panels on a drawer build like this. Typically I just leave the sides open, but since this was such a small module and I really just wanted to go the extra mile to make sure it turned out great, I wanted to go ahead and do these filler panels. The ABS plastic sheeting is left over from a project, as well as the carpeting, so it didn't cost me any extra to go through and do this. All right, everything's assembled and looking good. It's also so nice about using the extrusion is when you get T-nuts to cut all of your pieces, everything is cut to what, from what I can tell, absolute perfection. Nothing's out of square, everything fits, everything lines up, and that really just kind of makes the whole process more enjoyable and definitely worth it to get them to cut it to length for you instead of buying it in bulk and trying to cut it down to exact lengths on your own. As you can see, the filler panels worked out great. The only air gap we have is here on the bottom, which doesn't really bother me. I mainly just want to keep stuff from being able to fall behind the drawer while it's open. And as you know, we are mounting our drawer slides to that piece of extrusion, and having it as a real solid base to me is far more important than having it completely closed off. So next thing we're going to end up working on is getting our top plywood cut out. Get to measuring our top here, get a piece of wood cut out, and we'll show you what we do to secure it. Of course, you can just measure your top and mark the board accordingly. I just find it easier to clamp it in place with one of the corners squared with the structure, and then go ahead and trace out your lines. That way you know exactly what size you need to be for it to be nice and square and complete coverage up top. We got our top panel all cut out. I did take a router and just kind of bevel the edges here, and you don't have to do this. I just did it because I figured it would just make the carpet wrapping around not so harsh, just going over a super sharp edge. Once the carpet's on there, you probably will not really be able to notice the difference. What you see here is actually a jig. I've used a jig very similar to this on my past drawer builds. If you guys have watched those videos, I had to make another one because I had misplaced my other one during the move. Luckily, it's very simple to make out of just some scrap plywood, 2 pieces of equal length and then one that's smaller. And the whole point of it is when we're drilling our holes through our top lid here, we want it to be perfectly center
with the T-slot, and that being the T-slot that's running that way. And that's because we're going to be having a threaded T-nut in there, and then we're going to be running a bolt down through the wood and into that T-nut. So the best way to ensure that you are drilling nice and straight is to come up with a little jig like this. It is just 1/4 of an inch hole, but yeah, that's all you need. It's a nice, easy guide to make. I made it in probably 10 minutes, and it really helps things be nice and neat and make sure that you're drilling straight up and down. So next up, we are going to get all of our holes drilled on here that are going to hold it secure to the drawer module.
This honestly doesn't need very many screws to hold it down. I just did 1 on each side in the middle and 2 at every corner. You could probably get away with just doing 2 at every corner, or even just 1 in the middle of every side.
You can see we got all of our holes drilled now. It's sitting on top of a piece of marine carpeting, and I oversized it by 2.5 inches on every edge. So we got an extra bit of carpet that can fold over and give us complete coverage around our edges. Before we can do that, this is our top face. This is the one with our beveled edge. So we're going to be taking some liquid nails, Fuze it. We're going to be spreading it all over this top, and then you see this blue tape. This will help us keep it lined up because I'm going to flip it over, set it down on top of our carpet, and then once that's set on top of it, I'm just going to apply some pressure with my hands here, kind of help it begin to stick. We will go around with some pliers and pull the carpet nice and tight around some edges. Obviously, we're gonna have to get some stuff established before we can do that. So I'll probably go around and do this edge first, get a staple in the center, same with over there. Once I get all of my centers stapled up, I can really start to pull and work that carpet back and stretch it nice and tight, secure it down with our staple gun. We're going to be using some 3/8 staples and a Craftsman air stapler. You do not need an air stapler to do this. You can just do it with a regular hand stapler, although this will make it much easier on your hands.
Spreading the liquid nails around with a putty knife seems to be the easiest way that I've come across. I have used a tile trowel in the past for larger sections when I was doing stuff on the camper, like the side hatch doors and the roof. This works just fine for a smaller project like this. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. And then you can see me going back over on top of it with a roller. That is actually a roller that typically is used for applying pressure when you're doing sound deadening in a vehicle, and it works great for a project like this as well.
Just wanted to stop the time lapse and give you guys an up close look about how I finished my corners out. As you can see, there's not a lot of fabric left, and over there it looks like there's a lot, and you may not know what to do with it, so I'm going to show you how it's done. First thing we want to do is make sure we have some staples that are pretty tight to get the carpet kind of butted up. Now we're going to take some scissors and just cut all the way close to the edge here. We're not going to cut obviously all the way through because we need a little bit of a tail left. So cut until you get close to the corner, about like that. Do the same thing over here. All right, now you can see we have a shape like this. What we're gonna do is come down, probably leave about a finger's width of fabric, come straight down to our cut we just made on both sides. Now we have a little bit of a tail, and what this little tail is going to allow us to do is fill in our gap here while also stretching our corner nice and tight. So once again, just like we did for the rest of it, we're going to grab some pliers. We're going to pull this corner nice and tight, get our stapler, throw it in that corner so our tension is saved. I like to pull it tight again, and then one more to just finish it. And then you can just take your scissors and trim the excess. And that is how you finish a corner without having a bunch of crazy fabric everywhere, while also having nice coverage around our corners from the outside. To attach our drawer slides, we're going to be using a drop-in T-nut and another 1/4 20 thread bolt. I believe this bolt's only about 3/8 of an inch long as far as the thread depth size, and it's one of the smallest ones I could find, but it's still long enough that we need to do some countersinking on our extrusion to get it to fit right. So we'll show you what we had to do there. So here's our drawer slide. We have 3 different holes, as you can see, that are going to mount it. So we have one here, here, and here. Drilled those out with a 1/4 inch drill bit. Now once those fit through, we can put our drawer slide on top of our extrusion, lined up where we want it to be. I have this edge flush with the edge of that front piece. Now that we know the placement of the drawer slide, we can mark some holes with our drill and then pull this out of the way and drill some countersink. There's a void in the middle of the extrusion. I just drill down until we get to that void so we have a nice little pocket for our bolt to go into, because as it threads in to our T-nut here, now we have that empty space behind it to make up for the extended length of the bolt itself. So it'll just thread right and hold our slide on and have that nice space to sink down into and not bottom out on this part of the extrusion like it would before and never end up tightening up.
The other benefit to having countersink bolts means even if they were to work loose somehow, the slide cannot move at all because the thread's going down into the countersink. Even being loose, it wouldn't be able to move forward or backward or up and down.
With the drawer slides attached, we can now move on to building the actual drawer. It's easy enough to just measure across here and get 15 inches. You can also just do a little bit of math. We know our overall module is 18 inches wide minus an inch for each side of here, and then these are a 1/2 inch thick according to the specs on Amazon. So that leaves us with 15 inches. Of course, you can just double check with a tape measure. So we know it needs to be 15 inches this way. As far as the depth goes, we're gonna shoot right for 18 inches. And that is because the slides are 18 inches and we can't go much deeper than that with our backing plate. We can't extend it further this way because we're going to have a box that'll essentially be there, and then we're going to have another face on top of that box. And that face is gonna be our outer layer that will end up sitting flush with our extrusion there. So imagine if your drawer is way too long, you'd put your face on and it'd be sticking way out. So just go ahead and size the drawer, the box of the drawer to the length of the slides that you choose. The wood I'm using is actually some leftover from another project. This was just a little scrap piece to give you an example, but it's more of like a hardwood. It has less voids in it than birch does. Ideally, if you have access to Baltic birch, that would be my #1 choice. There's really nobody around me that supplies Baltic birch. I'd have to order it online, and it is just crazy, crazy expensive. So this like kind of hardwood plywood has worked great, and I love the texture and the grain in it and how it comes out once it's all stained. So that's what we're gonna be using on this project today.
When it comes to making cuts for your drawer or even for your top, I can't recommend a table saw enough. It is the easiest way to get perfectly square panels to use on your project. Just make sure that your table saw is actually square itself. I had a buddy who's a carpenter. He was over at my house actually right before I did this and noticed that the adjustments on my table saw were a little bit off, which is explained in the past why I've got some mixed results with this table. Once I had them lined up, this thing was performing perfectly and everything was exactly square.
All right, we'll go over our cut pieces here and give you links and everything. This is 5.5 inches tall by about 14 1/8. So if you add a 1/2 inch on each side, we're at about 15 1/8. And I did an 1/8 because I kind of measured a little closely, not without holding the camera up, and saw that it would have benefited by just being a little slightly wider. So that just says the Amazon slides are a little narrower than a 1/2 inch piece as advertised. Our bottom piece is going to be 14 1/8 by 18. So it's going to match the width of this front and rear face. And then it's also going to match the length of our sides because we want our sides to come down so we can actually end up securing it through the side and into our base. As far as our side runs here, they are 6 inches by 18 inches long. So they're the overall length of the drawer as we want it to be, which is 18 inches. And then they're 6 inches instead of 5.5 like our front and rear because it extends down and attaches to our bottom. So we had to give it that little 1/2 inch to make it tall enough. So once everything is in place, it looks nice and flush up top. Let's see if I can slide this in here without knocking everything over. So as you can see, this will be one of our faces. So we'll have one of these on each side and everything butts up like this. And once this part of our drawer is assembled, then we will get it all mounted up and we will start cutting out the actual face, which will be what you will see whenever you open the back door of the truck and see the drawer. Now, how we're going to assemble all these pieces together, it's a very, very simple process and maybe not as complicated as you may think. We're going to be just using some wood glue in all the joints as well as a finish nailer. These are 2-inch finish nails. I know anybody out there that's some sort of cabinet worker or something like that, you're probably going to say, why aren't you doing dovetail joints? You can totally do dovetail joints if you're familiar with it and it's something you want to do. The whole reason I do it like this is, first off, it's super simple. I don't have a dovetail joint tool, which sure I could buy one and do it simple, but every time I make one of these, I'm also doing a video, which is all geared towards inspiring somebody to feel like they can accomplish this at home in their own garage. So doing a simple method like this is better to show you guys because you may be less inclined to be scared of doing this method versus doing dovetail. And also it's just much easier. That being said, I've probably built, I don't know, 6 or 7 drawer systems for various applications, and they have been run for years now. One of them being in my Tacoma with probably 60 pounds of tools at all times, and they've been in there for 60,000 miles down trails and everything else, and I've never had an issue with any of the joints separating. I think partial of that is the wood glue, and then of course 2-inch finish nails are very sturdy. I mean, we're not talking about just little tiny needles that are holding things together. I mean, these are a decent sized nail, and it is metal that's binding things. So don't feel like you got to do the dovetail joints. I'm just letting you know right now, a simple method like this works very well. This is just a pneumatic finish nailer that I got in a 3-piece kit with the Craftsman pancake compressor. I think the kit was like 200 bucks. It came with the stapler you saw me using earlier in the video. It came with this, as well as, I want to say it's like a molding nailer or something. I don't know, not a carpenter. But anyways, this method does work really well, and I don't have anything against assembling your drawers like this. So next thing we'll do is start getting our sides attached to our bottom base plate. I'll probably get this one side done. We'll run in some finished nails along the edges, run in some finished nails along the edges. Then we will get our back and our front piece in there and do the same thing. And then that will be total assembly of the main box of our drawer, and we can start working on the actual face.
My biggest piece of advice for assembling a drawer this way is to make sure that your gun is at a perfectly level plane. So if the gun is angled down or angled up a little bit, when your finish nail goes into the wood, you run risk of it protruding through the upper or lower surface. So just making sure everything is nice and lined up can really make sure that your project turns out nice and clean. No worries if you end up having one that comes up through the wood. You can always cut it off and just kind of sand it down.
I changed my mind on a few things on this part of the build. I decided to stain the drawer to match the bench tops in the back of the camper. I just think that'll be kind of a nice touch. Just figured while I'm already here, let's just go ahead and make it kind of as aesthetically pleasing as possible. Not that it really matters, but I really like little details like this. So having the carpet matching the stuff in the camper, having the wood match the wood in the camper, it just will really tie everything together. So we got a coat of stain on that. And then the other thing I changed my mind on is the drawer face. So I originally was going to Raptor line it just like I have done in almost all my other drawer systems besides the 80 series. I've actually decided to go ahead and wrap it in the carpet. I held up a piece of our Raptor liner wood up right here. Just kind of imagined the carpet, the black, and the Raptor liner. I think it's just better if I stick with carpet and then extrusion. So it's just a very consistent look throughout. Here, all I've done is just taken some scrap carpet, and I'm just making sure I have my drawer face sized right. So I started with the actual width, which is like 16 by 7 1/4, and then I've just been taking blade width size pieces off the top and bottom until it seems like it fits well, because obviously the carpet adds thickness on the sides as well as the top. So these two little strips were perfect for this, just to go ahead and test. And now you see, you know, it fits in there nice and snug, but it's still loose enough that I'm going to be able to open and shut this drawer. So I think this is the final size for that. When you guys are doing yours, just do something similar to figure it out if you go with the carpet. So yeah, now that I got that sizing done, we need to get the hole cut for our latch. If you look here, it has to be recessed into the face of the drawer. So we need to figure out where exactly we need to cut on our drawer here. And then once that's done, we'll be able to match up our face to that drawer and then figure out exactly where we need to cut it on our face itself.
Cutting a hole for our drawer latch can be a bit tricky even with a router. Just to get perfectly smooth edges, your best bet would be to create some sort of jig to ensure that you have a perfect rectangle. Obviously that's not really ideal if you're just making a one-off one of these, so just free-handing it, do your best, it'll end up turning out just fine.
We've got a rectangular hole in our drawer face. Before we can do the hole in our actual drawer itself, we're gonna have to get it positioned and screwed on to the actual drawer slides. And that's just so we can make sure we're at the correct position. So what I'm doing here to set the correct height for my drawer is I have some scrap extrusion. You can use anything that's about 1 inch tall to mimic this. And then this is 1/4 of an inch plywood. And that's just because we're spacing the drawer up 1/4 of an inch. And that's just because if you load this thing up with a bunch of weight, you can kind of figure it may sag a little bit and you don't want it rubbing this on the way in and out. But you don't want to space it up too much because you're just killing space at that point. So now with that set up, we can just slide our drawer in. So this piece is just mimicking what the drawer face thickness is going to be, and to set kind of our depth of our drawer, we're pushing this back in until this is flush with the edge of the extrusion. Now if you're just doing like a coated or stained front, that is where you would stop. If you're doing a actual carpeted front like I am, obviously if we were to just leave it here and then carpet the front, then the drawer would just be kind of poking out a little bit from the edge and not totally flush. So we're going to end up pushing the drawer back even a little bit more, and that is just to make the carpet flush with the outside of our extrusion. So at that point, that pretty much sets the location of where our hinges are going to be bolted up to the drawer as far as depth. and then also height. So we're taking care of both of those at the same time. Next, you can get in there with a little pencil or Sharpie or something like that and just kind of make a mark. That way you can reference it, because sometimes when you go to pull it out, the slides are going to move and you'll just kind of lose your marks. So go ahead and just make a little reference mark. We will pull the drawer out and then we'll start getting it secured to the slides themselves.
If you've sized the width of your drawer correctly, as you're pulling this out, it'll bring the slides out with it, and just make sure it stays lined up with those marks. With our drawer pulled out and our first drawer hole exposed, now we're going to look at what we're going to use to attach it to the drawer slide. These are called pronged T-nuts, and they came in a 2-pack at Lowe's. As you can see, they have these 3 prongs that will dig into the material once you start screwing it in. So now that we see where our first hole is going to go, we'll take a drill through here. We will start this on the inside of the drawer, and then we can thread our screw in from this side, and it will pull this threaded nut. It'll sink it into the wood and create a nice permanent thread solution that is way sturdier and way stronger than just using some wood screws. I usually go through and do both of the leading screws, and then I'll do the middle and then the very end. And this just kind of helps ensure everything stays nice and level. Of course, we've got our spacer under the drawer to keep everything spaced just how we want off of the extrusion, which is about 1/4 inch. All right, so the main drawer module is all inside. You can see nice and smooth operation. And of course we got our soft close, which is just such a nice touch. And then as I mentioned before, the soft close also keeps this from being able to really rattle around, just because the slides are captured real well once it's in there. Just to give you a better look at those nuts I was talking about. So you can see from the inside, all you see is a little basically silver circle shape. Screws are threaded in from the other side, so they don't take up any space. There's nothing your stuff can get snagged on. And of course, like I mentioned, we are gonna be lining the whole inside of this with carpet. So now with the main part of the drawer located, we can put our face back in here. Once again, I'm using those strips of carpet just to kind of locate where the face is gonna be sitting as far as up and down and left and right. And we can take a pencil and just go ahead and trace out where we need to cut on our other drawer. So we'll trace this out, we'll pull it out and get that piece cut, and then we can move on to wrapping this face with carpet. We're gonna hole cut out with the jigsaw, and also take a note of the layer of wood that's taken off on that top side, and that's just to allow room for our black edge trim to sit behind the drawer face. Pay attention to the time lapse when we're installing the trim, and you will see what I'm talking about. Using the same methods that we did for our top to wrap our drawer face, and once we get all that done, try to clean up as much as you can of that carpet so it's not a super thick layer that's going to be pressing against your drawer, and of course make your cutout for your latch. I'm lining these drawers with the same carpet. I'm just taking some measurements, making some cuts, and kind of doing some fine tuning as I go, and then in the end I will take the stapler that I used and put some staples in it. You can hardly see them through the fuzz of the carpet once they're all in. Moving on to final install here is probably my favorite part. You just get a lot of satisfaction out of seeing a project come together and seeing the drawer slides work so well. The easiest way I've found to cut this trim is just with a sharp razor. You can see I'm making 45-degree cuts so all of our edges meet nicely. And like I mentioned earlier in the time lapse, we have that recess on the front, so our plastic trim is flush with the rest of the drawer and allows our drawer face to bolt up evenly to the front. Lining up all the T-nuts for your lid may seem a little intimidating. I'd like to put the top up there and take the drill bit and punch through our carpet, and then after it does that, it'll leave a little mark inside the extrusion exactly where you need to put your T-nut. So you go through and line all your T-nuts up with that, put your lid on top, and then slowly start to work each of your bolts in. Be sure to start them all one at a time before you tighten down any of them. After they're all started, you can tighten them all down and they're good to go. Alrighty, so that is everything wrapped up on the drawer. We got our bolts in today. According to the listing on Amazon, they're 1 inch long. And as you can see, they're talking about overall bolt length. So when you go to order, just be cautious of that. The first time I ordered 3/4 of an inch because I thought they were going to be talking about actual threaded portion, but they're talking about overall length. Use 12 of those, 2 on every corner, 1 in every center. Probably overkill. The lid's definitely not going to go anywhere. So our latch, everything there works great. It is lockable if you'd like. It comes with keys on Amazon. It's actually a pack of 2 latches as well. You can see on the back side here, it comes with this bracket that's actually in the shape of a C. I just put it in the vise and basically bent these ears outward just because I needed it to be able to sandwich a much thicker material than it was designed for. And then it ends up working out great. I actually don't even have the face attached to the drawer any other way but then with it sandwiched with this. That being said, I'm probably going to run some 2-inch finish nails through the face here
and into our sides. In hindsight, if I were to do it over again, before I wrapped this in carpet, I would have done one of those threaded nut inserts like I did to hold our drawer slides on, and then I would have just had a bolt basically coming through this face and into that face to bolt it to the front of our drawer. But either way works great. The edge trim has got to be my favorite touch of this whole thing. I feel like it really ties it all together. As you can imagine, if you did not have this edge trim, the transition between the carpet and the wood would just be a little rough. Once again, does not affect functionality at all, but it's one of those things, if you really like the aesthetics and the way things turn out, little details like this are really great. I love the color of the stain and the grain of the wood, and I ended up doing a couple coats of poly. I want to say it was probably 4 or 5, just to seal it up good, and sanding it with 1000 grit in between. There's ways to make it much smoother and a much shinier finish, but obviously this is just the side of a drawer, so I didn't go too crazy on that aspect. As far as installation goes, at least in my Tacoma, obviously this is going to be different for any vehicle that you're going to be putting this in, specifically for a 2nd gen Tacoma, and also I know this is true for a 3rd gen Tacoma. The brackets I'm using are basically just some aluminum, and then it's bolted to the factory back seat holes. And then I have another hole drilled up here, and then these are just like 1/4 turn studs. So as you can imagine, they slide into the T-slot, and as you tighten them up, they turn, and it just sandwiches it on there. My next order from Sen Cut Sen, I'm gonna design and create some nice clean ones for this. I just forgot to do that when I did the other part of my order the other day. And then on the back side, we have some 90-degree brackets, also from tnuts.com, that I had left over. That is just bolted through a 1/2-inch piece of plywood. And this 1/2-inch piece of plywood is actually bolted to the truck. So this is bolted in a factory hole. I got some little Z-channel aluminum brackets utilizing some factory bolt holes as well to hold down that side. So this drawer is 100% solid in the truck, not going to go anywhere even if it were to roll over. And that is the goal, because we're going to have a fridge on top of this, and that is going to be strapped to this drawer module. And I don't want the fridge going anywhere, especially not with a car seat next to it. So the goal was to have this thing as solid as possible in the truck, and then have a nice solid way to mount the fridge. The fridge is going to be able to strap down to an anchor point on the actual body of the truck. So everything here is going to be super, super solid. But we'll go ahead and get the drawer module in and mount it up, and we'll show you what it looks like. Here's the drawer all installed in the truck. You can see it's nice and solid, and it's not going anywhere. So I've already done a 10-day trip with this truck, with this drawer, and had it all loaded out. It was so nice just having easily accessible stuff like toothbrush, toothpaste, bug spray, Thermacell, sunscreen, just stuff that you really just need to quickly grab and just have nice and organized. Nice positive latching on that, and of course it's also lockable if you're parking somewhere. I did have room to have the fridge here, and it came all the way to this edge, and then I had my whole floorboard wide open for other storage. You can see it fits nicely with our second seat here. On the trip, I actually was able to do the rear facing car seat in the center of the truck, and then my wife was able to sit on the other side there. That way she could hang out with the baby in the back, just because it was a long trip. You may see a little peek of something back here, and that is the electrical system, which I've already also completed. I'm working on getting that video up, and that will be the next one that is on the channel. Alrighty guys, that's a wrap on this video. If you have any questions about any part of the process that I maybe didn't cover well enough in the video, feel free to drop a comment below and I'll answer it to my best ability. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. There's going to be some other videos coming out on the channel obviously here in the future. We're going to be working on the electrical system like I mentioned on the camper. We got some other little things, odds and ends with the camper that's coming up. And then of course we have the LS swap in the 80 series, and also kind of another big project on the 80 before the LS swap. So plenty of videos coming. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.